The next thing on our listening post is Historical Spotlight. We have Carol Ellemeyer, Carol Stream Historical Society, and I will now turn that over to Trustee Geiser.
Thank you very much. Throughout the year, we have been celebrating the bicentennial of the state of Illinois, the 200th anniversary, and getting ready for in 2019 will be the 60th anniversary of the village of Carol Stream. To help us start thinking about history, we've been having these historical spotlights throughout the year. And joining us once again this year, this month, will be Carol Ellemeyer, who is president of the Carol Stream Historical Society, and she's going to tell us a little bit today about the founder of the community, Jay Stream. He isn't just a junior high, a middle school. He was an actual person, and we'll find out a little bit more about Jay Stream from Carol. Thank you for joining us again. Thank you for doing the research and sharing the info you have.
It's always a delight to be able to share a little bit of the background of this community, because it really has a very colorful background, and it adds to the depth and the understanding of the community for us to learn about what came before. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to the board and to the village administration for allowing us to do this, because I think preserving and sharing our history is an important part of who we are. As Rick said, I'm going to talk a little bit about Jay Stream. He's kind of an enigma. We know that he was the founder of Carol Stream, but who was J. Wilson Stream? Well, we know he was the founder of his dream town, Carol Stream. He was a father, he was a son, he was a husband, and he was an entrepreneur with a capital E. He had many fingers in many different kinds of businesses, including insurance, ready-mix concrete, construction, personal business management, for a well-known entertainer, a presidential advisor, an international force organization president, even a car collector. He was born in Churton, Iowa, to Adrian and Theo Bennett Stream on April 17, 1921. He died on January 22nd in 2006 at the age of 84 in Scottsdale, Arizona, a world away from the village that he founded. And he got to Scottsdale by way of San Luis Obispo, California, with a lot of stops in between. His mother, Theo Bennett, grew up in Wheaton, and she was born in Riceville, Iowa. Jay graduated, like her, from Wheaton High School, and his mother taught in a one-room school that stood where Glenbard North now stands. She moved to Iowa after a stint teaching in that little country school and continued to teach, and that's where she met Adrian Stream. When Jay was 6, the family returned to Wheaton to live. They lived along Geneva Road, and Jay's mother taught in Glen Ellen for the next 40 years. His father farmed. When Jay Stream was a young man, after high school, he entered the University of Southern California on a football scholarship. On July 29, 1939, at the age of 18, he married Dorothy Kruger in Iowa. At the time, on their marriage license, his occupation was listed as machinist. That marriage was dissolved in 1950s, but the Streams had 2 children, Carol, whom you've heard about a great deal, and James. In 1942, Stream had his first solo air flight as a pilot for the United States Army Air Corps. He had enlisted in the Air Corps and took his flight lessons at the Thunderbird field in Scottsdale. So he already had an association with Scottsdale, Arizona, long before he moved there. He was 21 years old when he took that first solo flight. He was a bomber pilot during World War II, but he didn't see a whole lot of action. He was mostly assigned to flying USO entertainers to their destinations. After the war, he continued to love flying and continued to do so on a regular basis. He flew planes throughout his entire life. When he returned to the United States, he settled briefly in Boston and worked for the Hancock Insurance Company. And then decided that he really wanted to return to the Midwestern roots that he enjoyed so much, and came to Chicago and continued to work for Hancock for a short period of time in annuities. It was about that same time, in 1947, when he was 26 years old, that he founded Royal Ready Mix Concrete Company and was its first president. And in 1949, at the age of 28, he founded Durable Construction. He started building houses, kind of infill houses. There was a big demand for housing at that point in time because of all the young men that had returned from the war. And there was a shortage of housing. There had kind of been a downtrend after the big boom in the 1920s, and he was filling a niche that needed to be filled. In 1958, as we know, he planned a community with residences and a tax base built on industrial and commercial components. We know that community as Carroll's Dream. And when the village incorporated on January 5th, 1959, he was only 38 years old. That's quite an accomplishment. Now, during that above time frame that I was just speaking of, he was also involved in Midwest Land Corporation, which was a land development and shopping center holding company, for which he was the president. You may have heard of Hawthorne Shopping Center on Main Street in Wheaton. That's one of his works. It's where his offices were held at one time. There was also Wheaton Sewer and Water Company, Hydrostructure Corporation, which specialized in municipal disposal plants, swimming pools, and other concrete structures of that nature. And Hawthorne Bank of Wheaton, which he founded in 1962. He was the president and chairman of the board until he retired in 1967 at the age of 46. He married Dorothy McCullough on May 20th, 1960. They had a daughter, Linda, and she became enamored of Arabian horses. The Streams had had horses for many years, but Linda took a real liking to Arabians, and the whole family became involved. Somewhere along the journey, that connection led the Streams to a relationship with Wayne Newton, who was also an Arabian horse enthusiast, and Jay became Newton's personal business manager. He served in that capacity and others with Newton from 1971 to 1980. They continued their relationship and love of Arabians even after that time. The Streams settled in San Luis Obispo, California, on a ranch called Green Gate Farm, a few miles south of San Luis Obispo. It's described in the early days as a very beautiful place, a wide acreage with rolling meadows that was an Arabian horse breeding farm, and very successful. It's no longer a horse breeding farm. It's now a venue and a bed and breakfast. In 2012, the land was purchased and has been repurposed almost completely. It's now called Green Gate Ranch and Vineyard. And on the website, it's described in this way. The ranch rose to international acclaim under the ownership of Jay and Dorothy Stream, who occupied the ranch from the 1950s until 2012. Jay, of course, was gone in 2006, but Dorothy continued to live there with Linda until 2012. The Streams bred world-class Arabian horses after turning this majestic piece of land into a top-notch horse facility. His international recognition popularized the ranch as it became home to world-class Arabian events and extravagant galas and auctions attended by celebrities, royalty, and luminaries from the Middle East who traveled halfway around the globe to visit Green Gate Ranch. Jay became very involved in an organization known as the International Arabian Horse Association, the IAHA. And about the same time, there was a growing interest in establishing a new organization, which was a little bit broader reaching and more standardized, that came to be known as the World Arabian Horse Organization. This was about 1969. And WAHO, as shortened name would be, Jay chaired the steering committee to write their constitution. It was established as a nonprofit in the United Kingdom, and he served as the president from 1972 to 2003, more than 30 years. He even produced a film about Arabian horses in 1969, and it was called The Proud Breed. Jay was very highly respected by the membership of the Arabian horse community all around the world. He lived and moved in an international circle of friends. He rubbed elbows with the rich and famous. He worked with Wayne Newton, as I mentioned, from 1971 to 1980. In 1981, on October 13th, he attended a state dinner at the White House given by the Reagans for King Juan Carlos and Queen Sofia of Spain. Ella Fitzgerald performed Gershwin tunes at that event. It was also attended by Mike Wallace and Sid Charisse. He knew Ronald Reagan. A letter from Reagan to Stream appears in Kieran K. Spinner's book, Reagan, A Life in Letters. The letter is in a response to a communication that Stream sent to Reagan on with regard to a January 1980 60 Minutes interview regarding Reagan's campaign comments. The letter ends from Reagan, "Well, enough of my complaints. Your letter was right on, and I'm most grateful to you. Nancy sends her best, and give our love to Wayne. Sincerely, Ron." I think he must have had a fairly personal relationship with Ronald Reagan. Stream was an advisor during the Reagan administration on U.S. trade relations under the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Policy Advisory Committee for Trade, a little known fact. He also loved collecting vintage automobiles. This man was a man of many interests. He especially liked Chryslers, which incidentally happened to be the type of vehicle that Carol was riding in on the day of that fateful accident. At the time of his death, he had a 10-vehicle collection, and the dates of those automobiles ranged from 1928 to 1979. So, who exactly was Jay Stream? Well, we know him as a man who took an innovative approach to building a planned community, a problem solver who saw roadblocks as challenges to overcome. We talked about how he went about building his own town when he was told that he couldn't do that in Naperville. He incorporated residential with commercial and industrial properties in an organized way to equalize the tax base. He saw high taxes as a deterrent, and he worked to provide other community services and amenities like schools and churches. He developed talent and opportunities from those around him. His mother's brother, Ray Bennett, became a supervisor in his construction sites. Gordon Ori, a friend and schoolmate, became one of his salespeople. Ray Nagel was also a school classmate who owned land that now became part of Carol Stream. He was also very good with public relations. In fact, there's a story that he borrowed a fire truck and drove it around the streets of Carol Stream in the early days on the weekends when people would be visiting prospective buyers. It was a way of showing off some of the community services. And the police officer who drove his pink squad car around would stop and chat with people as well. It was a way of bringing people into the community. He was the founder of this village. He moved and left while the village grew up. But others knew him later on, and it's rather interesting to see what they had to say about him. Sometimes we know people better by what they say about someone when they're gone. On the World Arabian Horse Organization's website, there is a book of condolences for Jay Stream. There are pages, literally, and pages of condolence messages from around the globe, including places like Spain, Jordan, Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, Lithuania, Bahrain, Oman, and the United Kingdom, to name a few. Jay Stream is remembered there as a man who, when he set his mind to resolving an issue, it got resolved. A man who was confident, one who gave and demanded respect. He is seen as innovative, a natural leader, larger than life, gifted and successfully dealing with most everyone. He is described as clever, charismatic, bold, funny, and a storyteller. A man who had a distinctive laugh that was sometimes described as a giggle, and who was a good friend to his friends. So, who was Jay Stream? Well, there's one little story that I think might sum it up. One of the condolence messages was from a woman who had met Jay and Dorothy Stream at a horse show in Madison, Wisconsin, a number of years ago. They got into a friendly conversation, and it was in the evening, and Jay said to the lady, "Remember my name, I'm Jay Stream. I'll see you again tomorrow." The next morning, they happened to run into each other again, and the lady greeted Jay with, "Hello, Mr. Creek."
Mr. Creek.
And he turned and smiled at her, gave her a big hug, and said, "That would be Mr. Stream." Thank you. But they became fast friends, and this family lived in California and were friendly with the Streams for the remainder of their time while they lived there. So perhaps that's a little story that tells some of the personality of Jay Stream. Although, Jay Stream, we hardly knew you. So, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Carol, anyone have a question or a comment on the board?
Well, I always wondered about how the relationship came between him and Newton. I mean, from a builder and an entrepreneur here to be with the Wayne Newton is like almost, now flying the plane with the USO, that makes sense. That's probably where they met.
Well, they also had a very strong relationship with the Arabian Horse Association. Wayne Newton is a big proponent of Arabian horses. He's owned many championship horses. And so they have that connection as well. And the farm, Green Gate Farm, that the Streams owned in California was a breeder's farm. And so there were many big names who were owners of Arabians who were friends with the Streams. And that may have been an additional connection. I have not been able to uncover exactly how the two met.
So if he didn't start Carol Stream, would this all be Wheaton? I mean, really,
It's very possible.
because when we first moved here, we had a Wheaton zip code.
The very first zip code for this area, however, was a West Chicago. There wasn't any zip code, it was a West Chicago address, but this was before zip codes came into being. And so when the development was started, it had a West Chicago address, but it wasn't a real long time before it switched to Wheaton. However, the farmland was selected. I think we talked about this a little bit before when we talked about the origination of Carol Stream, that he looked for land that had good drainage, access to transportation, and room for expansion. And he did an aerial overview in order to assess where that land might be. And his first approach was to Dan Rice. And Mr. Rice was not willing to sell land. And so he continued north of Wheaton here and discovered that he felt that this would be a good place because of the access almost to rail transportation. He had to do some adjusting, some work with the railroads in order to get a line to come through to the industrial area. But, you know, that piece of it, like I said at the beginning of the piece, he saw challenges as just little stumbling blocks to be overcome. But by and large, the space and the drainage were two of the big factors, as well as roadways.
Was there ever a possibility in his mind to have a downtown? Because if you look at the way we're laid out, everything east of Gary is industrial, and everything west is all residential, unless you get out past North Avenue. I mean, there was never even close to being a downtown there.
No. I don't know that he specifically had that in mind. He felt that there should be a separation between residential and commercial, and that's part of the reason for the delineation of Gary Avenue, particularly with industrial and commercial on the east side and residential more on the west. His original plan called for a large shopping center at the corner of Gary and 64, Route 64. So, or North Avenue. So, I think he was disappointed that that never developed. He wasn't too fond of the idea that there was a strip mall on the west side of Gary Avenue. He felt that that might be something that the village of Carroll Stream would come to regret one day, because he felt that those things should be separated. They should, you know, have a relationship, but that there should be a separation between residents and any kind of commercial property. So I don't think he really planned on a downtown like we think of it, like Wheaton, like a Wheaton downtown, but he did want there to be some commercial property. But I think he was thinking of shopping centers, which at that time were a very modern way of shopping and a new trend. Fortunately, that's gone kind of by the by in the meantime, but that, I believe, was his original plan.
Very good. Any other questions?
Fascinating.
Carol, thank you very much for
you.
coming in.
Well, thank you very much. And in fact, that development he was proposing, and it was like 61 or 62, also a large hotel as well, to be part of that as well. And as we know, what ultimately happened was we got a grocery store up by Thunderbird. That was the only development in the early days. So, well, thank you very much, and thank you for sharing your knowledge of J Stream.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.